Business Speaker Series. We've brought together some amazing speakers discussing various topics affecting small businesses. This series is sponsored by NBC Universal, PSE&G, New Jersey Innovation Institute and NJIT, ZD Glover Insurance and Financial, Websignia, and Women Tech Makers New Jersey.
Thank you. Really awesome to be here. Thank you very much to the Circl. And thank you for joining me today. I'm Jason Dukes of Captain's Chair Coaching. And today we're going to be talking about the millennial mindset versus the manager mindset, and really ways to bring your business together with things that are going on currently in the world, with the current workforce, the current consumer force. So we'll go ahead and just start a little bit about me and why I'm passionate about this. Once again, Jason Dukes from Captain's Chair Coaching. You can go online and find me at captains-chair.com. Also follow on the social media platforms, Twitter at Be Your Captain, Facebook, facebook.com/Be Your Captain. I also have a meetup group here in North Jersey, and you can go on meetup.com and find it. It's called Visions Fulfilled New Jersey. It's for visionaries and entrepreneurs that are looking to fulfill on their passion. And then also there's an online social media conversation going on at #GiveYourGiftToTheWorld. So just a little bit about me and my background. I'm initially from Passaic, New Jersey. So I'm a New Jersey guy. And I've really had to work life in a way where I was always breaking down barriers, breaking down stories, breaking down perceptions, breaking down my own stories and the stories of others. So, I grew up in Passaic, New Jersey. A lot of people in my era were either, football players, basketball players, or rappers. That was kind of, what it is that people did. Well, then I came along, not very athletic, and certainly can't rhyme. Can speak, not rhyme. About high school, realized that I had a really deep passion for motorsports, which led me to starting to go down the path of working in motorsports. So ended up eventually working for NASCAR. As you can see, the middle picture there was my second job actually out of college. I worked for NASCAR, and that's a picture of me with Dale Earnhardt Jr. in victory lane when he won the Daytona 500. So, really interesting background of going from an African-American kid in Passaic, New Jersey, North Jersey, not much, motorsports happening in this area. And the other thing too is growing up in a family that most of the family relocated from the South because of the things that were going on in the South during their time. So to, wake up one morning and tell my family that, hey, look, I'm going down South to work for NASCAR was a pretty big deal. So, had to break up their stories, had to break up the stories of a lot of different people in order to make that happen, including some of the people in NASCAR. When I got there, they were, couldn't really understand why I was there, why I had such an interest, or, what sort of like practical joke thing was going on, but it was really true. And so, stayed in motorsports for a couple of years. Well, I shouldn't say a couple of years, about a decade before I moved back home when my dad got sick. So, really had to reinvent myself, had to reinvent life. Once my dad got sick, so moved back home, worked in a couple different industries before finally focusing on becoming a life and success coach, which is something that I was actually pretty passionate about throughout the whole time. So when I was at NASCAR, one of the biggest things that I enjoyed the most was working with the interns that I had, working and developing people. Same in aviation, same in education, developing people, and so that's what I do now as a business and success coach. So on the next slide, you'll see some of the places where my work has appeared. I do lots of speaking engagements, and this is cool. I'll be happy that I'll be able to add the Circl to this list because I'm really amazed at the platform that was created in this series. I mean, I've learned a ton from the series this week. So I hope that if you're watching this, you've also watched a couple of the other a couple of the other presentations because I've learned a lot. But I've been featured on Monster.com, US News, the Network Journal, spoke at the AgileIndy Conference, have been in Forbes online magazine, and then also in the business journals. And those are just, a snapshot of some of the things that I've done, but really focus on bringing peace to the world by helping people find their gift and give their gift to the world. And a lot of that has to do with deconstructing a lot of the stories that we have, so that we can move ahead powerfully and be authentic. So let's talk about the agenda for today. Today, we're going to be talking about, managing the gap between millennials and managers of my age. I'll just be upfront and let you know that I'm 37. So I'm kind of, I'm in between. Like, I'm not a millennial, but I taught high school, so I think that probably, brought the gap a little bit better in for me, because I get young people a lot more than people my age, but I am 37, so I'm kind of on the outer verge of millennial. But so managing that gap. So today what we're going to do is identify the generational stories of both sides, really both sides. So what doesn't work for millennials? What does millennial management look like? Like, what do people who have grown up as a millennial in this culture, or even internationally in the international millennial culture, like, what does it actually look like for them to manage? How to prepare for millennial managers, right? You're running a company and you need a workforce. And not only do you need a workforce, but you need a workforce that's going to do tasks that are current. You need someone to handle your social media. You need someone to communicate with clients the way that the current clients are looking to be communicated with. Like, you're going to have to, bring in millennial managers for that. And then also ultimately how to succeed in the marketplace, which includes and soon to be led by millennials. So we can move on and we'll talk about a big piece that really gets in the way of all management, but especially when we're talking about management between two generations, and that's being right versus reverence. And reverence is a word that has become extremely important to me over the past year, right? Like, it's something that I should say I've become more aware of it over the past year. It's something that I've been doing all of my life. Like, I've always, had real deep respect for someone else, like for other people. I've really been able to have empathy and be able to hear what other people are saying or what other people are thinking, or kind of be with other people in their process. But as a life and success coach, it has become, I've become aware of how important it is to really, have a really deep respect for someone else. And it was important for me in NASCAR. It was important for me in education, especially with the generational gap that I had there. But let's talk about being right versus being reverent or having reverence. One of the big gaps between millennials and older generations is just our stories. And unfortunately, one of the things that so our stories, they keep us safe, they keep us, productive, they keep everything in line for us. The only problem with our stories is that we have to be right about our story, which actually stops us from being reverent and having deep respect for others, because we're trying to live a life to be right. So one of the things that we really need to think about, especially in this presentation, is that there is no right. Like, our story, if you're in my generation, kind of in between generations, like, it doesn't necessarily mean that, I've figured out the world or I'm right. The generation older than me, because they're older and wiser, also doesn't mean that they're right. And the millennials, as they come up, doesn't mean that they're right. They just have an agreed way of thinking. And one of the ways to, not necessarily to make this political, but if we can take a step back and look at it from a different perspective, if we look at what's going on in the presidential elections, right? Like, you have all of these candidates, and they all are right. Like, they all go around thinking they're right. And there are populations around the country that think their candidate is the right candidate. And, like, there's what our political system probably needs, and this is me being right about what our political system needs, is a little bit of reverence. Actually, for people in the Northeast actually have a deep respect for people in Middle America that did lose their jobs. For people in the Midwest that did lose their job, to have a little bit of reverence and respect for the companies that move the work to different places. For everyone to have reverence and respect for the companies that had to move their companies where they're cheaper labor just so that they can get their products into places like Walmart and sell it at a decent price. And also having some reverence for places like Walmart that they have to keep their price low, so they have to force their suppliers to have their prices at such a level so that the people can come and shop in Walmart, and so that Walmart can keep their brand up. So it's just kind of across the board reverence, and what would happen if there was that across the board reverence. So one of the things that actually gets in the way of reverence, and I get it too, because I do it, right? Like, I'm up here saying that one of the things that we need to break down in order to manage this gap is to stop being right, and I'm being right about the political system. But one of the things that gets in the way, or one of the things that fools us about reverence, is when I've talked to lots of millennials, and I've talked to lots of managers that are not millennials, that are older generations, and they know a lot about the other person, right? They'll say, oh, well, I know how this is going to end up because I know how they are. And what ends up happening a lot of times is that people are actually still in their being right. They're being right. They're actually just building evidence that they're right. So they're actually not going on to the side of the other person and really having deep respect for them. Rather, they've just figured everything out about that person, and they're building evidence for why they're right and the other person is wrong. And so, I mean, in businesses, you'll see this all the time on how, millennials, they know how older managers are, and they're just building evidence on why they're right. And the same with older managers, they know how millennials are, and they're just building evidence on how they are right and how the millennials are wrong. So one of the big things is, before we start actually talking about tactics on how to manage and how to manage the gap, is just the being, like, actually having deep respect for others is super important. If we can't have that deep respect for others, then you might as well turn off right now, because none of the tactics are really going to work. So let's go ahead and start moving into some of the differences. So let's take a look at the stories of our generation, or I'll go ahead and say it, my generation. Like I said, I'm kind of in the middle of generations, but some of the stories of my generation. One is that communication is one-on-one. Communication is in person. It's one-on-one. I pick up a phone or I text you, but it's actually it's communication. Like, we're gonna talk it out. I'm gonna know how you feel. I'm gonna know what you're saying, but we're actually going to have some sort of interaction. Lots of time the communication is in person. Like, we actually need to see the other person. We need to be connected to the other person. We need to maybe hold or feel them, and get that these are major generalizations, but it's worth making the major generalizations to see the difference between the two. So one is that communication is one-on-one. Another story of our generation is that work is a commitment, whether you love it or not, right? And maybe I'm on the part of the curve that started to drop off, because for me, like, the difference between me and my parents, it's huge. Like, my dad, worked for many years, retired, and then got another job and died. Like, that was his commitment to work. My mom worked at the same job for probably 30 or 40 years. Sorry about that. That wasn't supposed to happen. Worked for the same company for about 30 or 40 years before quitting. So actually before being let go. And so for people of older generations than me, I'm kind of like right in the middle. Like, work is really, it's not whether or not you like it or not. It's just a commitment. It's something that you do, It's something that you actually believe is going to be there for you. And it's something that you do. You wake up every day, you go to work. Another thing about people of our generation or older generations is that we're working to retire and also working for stability. Like there's, the reason why we work is for that. So there's actually, in many cases, sometimes a separation between, work, pleasure, passion, purpose, right? Like work doesn't have to include the pleasure, passion, purpose, right? And so there's actually a huge, millennials come and I'll get more into this, but millennials come into workplaces like that and they hear that people, standing by the water cooler, not really loving their life, and they don't get it. Like they don't get why you don't go to work to love life. So working to retire, working for stability, and not necessarily working for your passion. One of the stories of our generation, because of the way that, the way that we consider work, is that we consider millennials selfish. Right? Like absolutely consider millennials selfish. Like, you should come in because this is my story. This should also be your story. Like you should come to work. You should shut up, work, be here forever. You're going to be here for the long term. You still have lots of time to go. Why are you rushing things? Like, it's all. And like I said, I'm kind of on the middle of the generation. And I remember when I first moved back to New Jersey, I got a job in New York City, and every morning I would have to go get on a bus and take about a 40-minute bus ride into the city. And I started to see like the difference in generations. Like there were people on that bus that had been taking that bus for 20 years and going into the city and doing their job. And meanwhile, I was on like day 20 and couldn't take it anymore. And I can't imagine the difference between me on day 20 and them on day 20, like just the different stories. Like me on day 20, I was already thinking of how to pull the parachute. Meanwhile, the people who had been there for 20 years on their 20th day, they were thinking like long-term stability, how great it is to get a job that, that they can keep for the rest of their lives. People in our generation also have care for how it's been done in the past. And that's something that's a little bit different from the millennials, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But our generation is actually worried about getting it right, about how other people have done it in the past, on how it should look, on education, case studies, different things like that. Like what does it look like? What should it look like? How does it work? So maybe a little bit more conservative on things rather than aggressive, but really actually have some sort of connection to how it's been done in the past and, how it is. And then another story is that, we definitely think that millennials aren't responsible, which is pretty interesting considering, the huge student loan debt that millennials have and actually how responsible they are as a generation. But, one of the things that I saw a bunch of, people my age getting off on the internet was there was a video of a millennial saying how selfish millennials are. And like, I looked at all the likes and they were all likes from people my age. And it's like, well, there kind of goes back to that being right versus being reverent and building evidence for your point. It's, people of our generation think that millennials are selfish. So you find a millennial to say that, and then you get a whole bunch of likes from people in my generation. So let's talk about millennials. Let's talk about the story of millennials. And like I said, these are huge, giant generalizations, but for the most part, there's facts behind some of these, right? But millennials work for completely different reasons, right? Like you could actually see it in the two different pictures that I chose, but millennials work for different reasons. They actually want what they want, and they want it now, right? So millennials have grown up watching things fall apart, right? Like, other than people of my generation or older that have watched things grow and sort of fall apart, but they still have faith in the system. Millennials have come and they've seen things fall apart. So it's going to be really hard to convince a millennial like, hey, come here and, work here until you retire, because that's not a story that actually fits into any sort of construct that has existed during the lifetime of millennials. So they want what they want. They want it now because they really don't believe that it's going to be there in the future. So they want what they want, and they want it now. And this one probably could have come out of the interview pool of people that I interviewed, but consider older generations sad, and the reason why we are living for now. Like that's a common story among millennials is they go to work and their energy is actually zapped from the energy of the older people, like older people who are like, another case of the Mondays, or it's Monday, or it's Tuesday. And like that whole weekly pattern of work doesn't work for millennials. And one of the reasons why it doesn't work for millennials is because of the role that we've played. Like we've actually convinced them that it's not worth it, that it is bad. And so they're smart. They picked up on it and they're like, yeah, we don't want to do that. And so that's something that millennials have taken on to. Millennials don't want to model their managers, and they'd rather take what they want and go somewhere else. So and there's a couple things to that. One, we talked about how people of our generation are case study based, want to be right, want to know how it was done, and kind of get it right in that model. Millennials aren't interested in that. They're actually not interested in having things go the way that they've gone. So it's super important for millennials to actually be creators and change and have it. They're also not interested in staying places very long, right? Like get what you can get, go somewhere else, get what you can get, do that. Very interested in learning, but a different type of learning from people of our generation, where people of my generation, and I should say my generation, but my generation learn to try to get things right. Whereas millennials are they're just learning to learn, like learning to get basic constructs on how to create. Some of that is because of the change in the education system, but also just some is culture, the stories that they've heard growing up and how they put things together. And then the faith part is they really want something to believe in. Like unlike us, like we grew up in the, America is great, your company is great, like whatever factory is in your neighborhood is great, or whatever job is in your neighborhood is great. Like we grew up with those stories. Millennials didn't grow up with those stories. Like millennials grew up in a completely global society with, with lots of different messages, and they got to choose. They're actually looking for something to have faith in. And they get that companies don't last forever. And so they're interested in aligning with something that's going to work for them now. Like they almost understand that there may not be, like, they're not making decisions now for 5 years down the road or now for 10 years down the road. They're making their decisions now for now, because there's really a for now learning. Like they've learned that things have to be for now. And that's something that current managers or people of my generation or older don't necessarily get or understand about millennials. But we also have to understand that we created it. Like they saw what we were doing and decided to do it. Very vision focused, like really want to know where things are going and why, because they actually have a separate decision-making mechanism that older generations don't have. Like older generations aren't necessarily thinking like as critical on whether or not this thing is going to work out, whether or not this place is going to work out, where millennials, like they want to know the vision because they want to know if they fit and like now, like extremely now, like quickly now. So that's a big difference. They need to be convinced and enrolled, right? Like once again, because of that extra decision-making mechanism that they have that older generations don't have, like, you don't just come in and say like, hey, look, this is the direction the company's going. And, older generations go to the water cooler and sulk about it, but then, eventually line on and go forward. With millennials, there actually needs to be convincing and enrolling. And in many cases where older managers fail is the convincing and enrolling isn't done in their language. So it's done in language that worked for past generations, or the thing that worked, because of course we went out and studied how to do it. So didn't communicate to the millennials in their language, and so then that's where some of the things break down. It's wondering how come these millennials aren't enrolled and moving forward with the goal, or just leaving or dropping off. Well, it's because they weren't enrolled. And like I said, they have that extra decision-making mechanism, and they're ready to go. As soon as it doesn't line up, they're ready to go. And once again, they don't care how it's always been done. Like, they're just not interested in how it's always been done, compared to, people of my generation or older, where, we have somewhat huge respect for how it's been done. Actually, in some cases, feel like the way that it's been done is the way that it should be done and the way that it will be done. Millennials don't care. Like, they really don't care. So another thing with millennials, and this is probably spreading throughout all generations, but the student loan debt. We talked about the student loan debt, and student loan debt is huge. And so that's one of the things that actually sort of keeps them tied to their jobs. But the student loan debt is highly important, and a huge thing that you need to consider. And once again, I would say consider it from a place of reverence, and not consider it from a place of being right, or consider it from a place of holding your millennial worker hostage, because that's not going to work either. So those are kind of the differences between the stories of millennials and the stories of managers of my age and older. And so, as you could see, and this is a pretty quick slide here, but as you could see, there's really a need for reverence, right? Like, this doesn't work. This absolutely doesn't work if both sides are trying to be right, because it's like Republicans and Democrats right now. Like there's a huge there is a gap. And if the older managers of my age or older, if we're trying to be right, like, it's not going to work, because the millennials they're not giving in. And one of the things that we don't see is one of the reasons why they're not giving in is because of the way that we've modeled the way that things go. Like, they're not enrolled in that. Like, they don't want to live their life that way. And it's not a bad thing. It's just that's not what they want for themselves. So there is a need for reverence. There's a need for respect across the boards. And once again, as I said, respect not in service of being right, not in service of creating more evidence that you're right, but reverence and respect to get the other side and actually move forward and push things forward. So let's talk about millennial managers. Millennial managers are extremely team focused, and they, it's actually funny that millennial managers are team focused, because a lot of older people can't see the team focus. It's like, well, how's the person team focused when they're doing this all day? Like, that's actually the communication. That's actually the communication with the team. Millennials have not necessarily figured out, but they grew up in a way where you can be team focused without actually being present to the team, right? So communicate in an extremely different way, but very team focused. And there's also there doesn't have to be meetings like actual formal sit around the table in shirt and tie meetings in order to get the information back and forth, right? Like, these are the people who grew up in high school with message boards, in college with message boards, where the professor communicated one-to-many through a message board, and then the students communicated with their groups through message boards or through social media and different things like that. So, they've grown up in education systems that have, talked about partnering and working in groups, but not necessarily like needing to be like we did when I went to college. Working in a group meant that we had to go to the library and sit, find a time and sit next to each other and work with each other. That's not what collaboration means anymore. And so millennial managers are aware of that. Millennial managers are more likely to ask for their needs than managers of older generations. So it's like more interested in asking for their needs, but once again, in that get it now like there's no right time or no right place to ask for the need. So millennial managers have pretty much grown up in an era of no doors, easy access, kind of like a help me now type thing where, and also short attention span, right? Like help me now. And if you don't help me now, like, I'm gone, or I may not even need the help when you get back around it because I went and got it from somewhere else. So, take a look at the structures that you have to manage your millennial managers now when it is that they need the help. And also just to look at the structures to see how far away you are from your millennial managers. Like there may, with older generations, like, a structure where, people go through one person to get to you work. With millennial managers, that may not be the best structure. Millennial managers are actually worried about how others feel, and I say this. I mean, I get that everyone's human, but people of older generations may not think that millennial managers have a feeling for others, but there is. They do care how other people feel, good and bad. And so, one of the things, especially in relationships, right? Like for people my generation and older, like relationships actually meant a one-on-one relationship where you met with someone, like maybe you got in a fight with somebody on a playground and it blew up. And so like now I'm not your friend anymore. Well, for millennials, like not being someone's friend in many cases has been as easy as just unfriending them, on a social media platform, pretty much clicking a button, and that means that it's over because I've got these thousands of other friends. And sometimes that will actually, come into the workforce a little bit of, well, I'm done here. Like where's the button that I click when I'm done and ready to go? And it's actually not that simple. And so, you may just want to keep an extra eye out on if the relationship is souring, on the potential exit strategy of the millennial manager, because they may be looking just for like some quick button to press in order to get out of the relationship. So I'm actually gonna to go over some quick, I think there's 7 or 8 tactics that I have for managing and preparing for millennial managers, and also the same for millennial clients. So the first one, as we talked about, is really get over your story. Like your story is your story. Your story is a story of, a shared story of people in your generation, probably a shared story of people in your industry, maybe a shared story of business owners in the area that you work in. And your story just isn't in service of your business. Like it's not in service of your business. It's not in service of the relationship between you and your millennial managers and also your millennial clients. Like it's just your story, and it doesn't actually support you. And so there's a huge opportunity to just get over it, and come from the being reverent rather than right. Like you don't need to be right. Well, I shouldn't say you don't need to be. You probably do need to be right about your story, but being right about your story actually will, get you in more trouble, and hold you back more than it will push you forward. So there's a lot more negative impact than positive impact of holding on to your story. The next thing with millennial managers is trust them. Especially in managing them. And this is, really like the perfect, the perfect visual, but, help them create a vision for themselves, help them create some milestones, and then really get out of their way. Get out of their way and be there for them, but get out of their way, because they're going to move a lot quicker than you think. They'll probably be a lot more aggressive than you like. But trust them. Actually trust that they have the interests that you want. I mean, actually, make sure that you co-create that with them, because they're going to go, and they're going to go fast. And so you need to make sure that it's in line with what you want. But, once you unleash them, like you don't want to, just like the picture of the dad and the daughter on the bicycle, like once you let the daughter go, Like you don't want to run her down and then, start grabbing the handlebars and doing something different like that. Like once she's gone, she's gone. So, make sure that all the directions are up front, make sure they're clear, make sure that you have, open communication lines and ways that you guys can communicate and co-create that communication. And that's something that we'll talk about. Actually, we'll talk about now in this next slide. To co-create a communication plan, right? Like once again, about being right on both sides. Like millennials have a way they communicate, people of my generation have a way that they communicate. And then your company probably has a way that people within the company communicates. Well, with millennial managers and millennial clients too, it's going to be super important that you co-create a communication plan that's going to work for now. Remember, people of my generation are very interested in how things went in the past. Like what is your communication plan? Okay, cool, let's use it. Millennials aren't interested in that. Like they're not interested in like, oh, what's your communication plan? Let's use that. It's like, no, there's this new really brilliant way of doing it. Let's use it. And some of the programs that I work in, and I have to do this too, some of the programs that I work in, just something as simple as transacting money back and forth, right? Like, it's actually pretty funny. I'm from the generation, I don't carry cash. I carry ATM cards. So whenever I owe someone money, it's like, I'll go to the ATM, as crazy as it sounds. I'll go to the ATM, pay the fee to get the money out to give to the person that I owe. Well, current millennials are like, this happened last night. A guy owed me some money and he went on his phone and he was like, okay, I just Venmo'd you the money. Like I have no clue what Venmo is. Actually, I shouldn't say that. I've heard it. But like he's actually sent me money. I don't even know how to get it. Like I have to figure out how to get this money. But the point is, that there's an easy way for this thing to happen. Like I don't have to go to, run to an ATM, find an ATM, pay the fees, get the money, give him the cash, then he has to go to an ATM. Like you just use the thing called Venmo, which now I have to figure out. But either way, there needs to be a communication plan that's co-created that works for both sides. And I know that, immediately managers are like, well, but it's my company. They should have to learn my way. And look, that's fine. It could be. But there's also probably a way that you can co-create a communication plan that works better for both of you guys, that works better. It's really that simple. You don't have to do this. It's a suggestion. The next one is make it fun and risky, right? Like we said, the risk tolerance for millennials is high, and the fun tolerance is high. Like it's really it's actually, I go into and consult in a couple companies, and there's ping pong tables, there's bean bags, there's all these things, espresso machines to try and make it fun and interesting place to be. Like this isn't our generation's, brown furniture, dark rooms, just go because you have to go to work. Like the place needs to, well, it doesn't need to be, but there's an opportunity for you to make it fun. But then also have it be a risky place. Like a place where people want to be, where they can see there's a little bit of risk and there's a little bit of fun in being there. So, there's a line of fun, there's a line of risk that really works well for millennial managers, just for their generational construct. And once again, as I said, these are huge, giant generalizations. So it may work for most of your managers and not for all. On the communication side and also on the management side, and this is in the next slide, is that you really want to give them what they need. Right. So as a manager, and this is tough, right? Because you build infrastructures and you'll always be chasing the newest and better thing. And infrastructure is expensive. But with millennial managers, like it's really important just to give them what they need. And in many cases, like in co-creating a communication plan, like, if what they need is a tablet or a laptop or something like that. Like there are many companies that are just telling people, look, bring your own. If that's what you need, bring your own. And then, you make sure that it's synced up to what's going on with the rest of the company, and do it that way, but really give them what they need. One of the things that, like millennials are really not interested in having, doing things like I said, doing things the way that they're just normally done, especially if it's considered not not optimal or a waste of time. So, really give them what they need from a social media standpoint, from a software standpoint, from a hardware standpoint. Really find out and give them what they need, but also, in that co-creation of a plan, let them also understand the limitations of a business that, we may have to decide what we need for the next year. And then 3 months from now, we can't redecide. Like, this is going to be a yearly thing that we do. We decide what we need, we roll it out in the next month, and then we have to use it for a year or so. The next thing is millennial managers, as I said, they need something to believe in. So, this is a great image of, a lady in a farm somewhere with the American flag. Like, millennials aren't, they're not like, and that's one of the reasons why Donald Trump, can get away with like making America great again. Like, just the word again, like, people have lost hope. They actually have nothing to believe in, and millennials are looking for something to believe in. They don't know it. They may be resisting it, but they are looking for something to believe in, and your company may be the thing that they can believe in. But just know that if millennials are in your company and they don't believe in what you are doing, and the same on the customer base, like, if they don't believe in what you're doing, you're going to lose them eventually. So just make sure that you're always enrolling, always convincing, always have a vision that is something that's juicy and tasty to the next generation, because other than that, they're pretty likely to fly out on you. So focus on the future and not the past. Like we talked about a couple times now, is that focusing on the past is something, or focusing on the past, focusing on the way that things are or have been in the past, is not something of the millennial generation. Like, that's something of our generation. Millennials are super interested in the future, and the future that they can create, the future that you guys can create together, but not so much interested on the way that things were in the past. So, really take the opportunity to start to really just change how you think on things. Like, how much of what we're doing today is based on the past rather than based on the future? How much of our language is based on the past instead of being based on the future? Like, how much am I enrolling people into the past or enrolling people into the future? And just know that the listening of millennials is for the future and not the past. There's also, because of that, there's a way of being a leader in the organization too, and some of the words too. And in the next slide, you'll see that I wrote, be a mentor and not a role model. And, the interesting thing about it, right, is most people will be like, well, I don't get it. It's the same thing. Well, potentially, yes. And think about the things that we've distinguished and become aware of in this presentation here, is that, being a role model actually means like modeling the role, right? It's in it, modeling the role. Millennials aren't interested in someone modeling the role, because they're interested in defining the role and not necessarily interested in how it's been in the past. The other thing is, if you're going to be, if you decide that you're going to be a role model to a millennial, like, you really need to speak and talk their language. Like, if you're gonna model the role for a millennial, like, you need to make it interesting to a millennial. Other than that, it's just it's not going to work. So, opportunity more to be a mentor rather than role model. And a lot of that may just be in the way that you're being about it, the language that you're using. But, just really focus on that they're not interested in following a model, So those are the steps that I have for preparing for millennial managers, and get that a lot of these steps you could also use for millennial clients and customer bases. And also get that a lot of this, the back end of this presentation was tactical, but it's all based on the foundation of the foundation of this presentation is that we really need to change the being and be reverent towards each other, and not just being right, like, really opportunity to be reverent and not right. So on this slide here, here are all the different ways that you can get in contact with me. I'm based here in North Jersey. You can go on my website, captainschair.com, Facebook at facebook.com/beyourcaptain, or on Twitter at beyourcaptain. I have lots of offers. If you go on the Captain's Chair website, you can sign up for a free 30-minute business success evaluation where you spend 30 minutes with me, and we can talk about conversations either that we had here on the Circl webinar, or we could also just do a success coach session on the business or the career that you're working on. So, please go to www.captains-chair.com and sign up for that. I really look forward to speaking with you, each and every one of you, that way. It's a great way to connect and to move a relationship and conversation forward. All right. So that's the end of my presentation. I hope that there was a lot that you got out of it. It's a great conversation. It's something that I'm super passionate about, especially in breaking down stories. And like I said, and like I told you, there's a huge, I'm related to this a lot because of the way that my career and my life has gone. It wouldn't have gone the way that it did if I were holding on to the stories that I had, and not really having reverence for others and for the way that it is. It just wouldn't have worked. So, go ahead, click the check-in buttons if you have any questions or comments that you'd like to make. I would love to hear it and love to be of service for you for the next couple minutes.
Hi, Jason. My name is Karen Pashota, and I'm looking forward to presenting tomorrow, but I'm here to help Steve Jones and the team here at the Circl, and just wanted to share with you one of the questions that we've gotten for you today is a manager who would like to hear a little bit more about mentoring and your suggestion to be a mentor, excuse me, not a role model. And this person says that they feel that millennials don't always recognize the importance of experience and learning from those who have been in the field. So I was wondering if you can give our listeners some advice on how to help millennials recognize the value of experience.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's a great question, and it's it's a great question, and well, I'll repeat the question. It's millennials. A manager that wants to has a question about the role model versus mentoring a millennial, but also getting the millennial to understand the experience, the importance of experience. And so there's a couple things. One of it is that millennials in general don't have as much need to understand the importance of experience the way that our generation did, right? Or even generations older than me. We had a huge respect for experience, the way that things went. I mean, even though we were rebellious, we were rebellious in a different way. So millennials are really one of the things with experience is if you want to play the experience card with a millennial, you really have to be enrolling and engaging on how things went for you, right? If if you start talking about things well, here's where I had to compromise, or here's the 2 or 3 years of my life that weren't great, and and then ultimately it was good. That's something that actually doesn't work in the hearing of millennials. They literally can't hear it, and as true as it is for us, it's just something that they can't hear. So in order to speak to millennials and actually talk about experience, it has to be taught or spoken in a way that they can hear it, in a way that their listening is just trained or has been culturally trained to hear. And we're not used to telling it that way. We're used to my story of experience and how I got here, look, my dad got sick. My dad did this. I struggled for a couple of years and, worked odds and end jobs. Millennials can't hear that. It's my experience, and it's super important to me. And I have to, if I'm talking to millennials, I really have to edit some of that stuff out because it's nothing they can hear.
That was very helpful. Thank you. We also have another question from another listener who wants to find out some of the characteristics that they, as a manager of millennials, should look for in terms of making decisions about promoting millennials within their company. What suggestions?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. So characteristics on looking to hire millennials in your company. I think it may be more conversation than characteristics. Like with the millennials, it's super important to find out who's the most enrolled in moving, who's the most enrolled in moving forward. So when you're having conversations with them, like not the one that's producing the most right now, but who's actually enrolled in the vision that you have for the company and speaks either a common language or a language that you've created together. Because I mean, it's a little bit different in our generation where there was just this like blanket agreement that America works, the company works, and we're all aligned and just staying here until we're retired. So we're actually like looking for characteristics with millennials. It's once you find the characteristics that you're looking for, there's that added discussion of who's really enrolled in being here, who's enrolled in the future of the company, and who is interested in where this company is going and where we're going, and who do I have common language with. So so looking at the characteristics, that may be it may be a distraction. Like we may be looking at the wrong place. It's probably more who's more enrolled.
And we have time for one more question. This comes from Shante Palmer, and she's asking about, shares a comment about millennial leaders, recognizing that they have value to offer, especially in terms of positioning companies to be competitive in the near future, and how they can attract and keep talent like them to help sustain an organization's competitiveness now and in the future. But she wants to know, what is the best way for upper management to support millennial middle managers? What advice would you give her?
Yeah, the best way to support, so the question is, what's the best way to support for upper management to support millennial middle managers? It starts at a being level of just like not needing to be right, for having reverence for for the way that things are and appear for you, the way that things are and appear for the millennial manager, the way that things are and appear for your end clients, and then like creating, and a lot of it is in the tactics that we talked about, but creating a common language that you guys can talk, and also creating a communication plan so that you can enroll them in a vision on how to move forward, so that there's conversation going back and forth. Give them the tools that they need, and then also trust them and get out of their way. Like it's a lot in the tactics that we talked about in the presentation, but it's one of those things where when I got to the tactics section of this, like I really wanted to make it neat and like have like 3 tactical things or 5 tactical things, and I started with 3 and then was at 6, and then I was like, all right, well then let me back it down to 5, and ended up with 8. So those 8 things pretty much need to work in tandem with each other, but like they work in tandem, but they work on top of creating that reverence and not needing to be right about the story, because none of them work. If you write, none of them. If you need to be right about your story and how things are and not have reverence for the other side, then none of the tactics will work.
Jason, this has been a great presentation. Thank you so much for all your great advice. I'm sure our listeners really appreciate it and have enjoyed hearing from you and hearing your advice for success in managing millennials and helping us understand their mindset. You are listening to the Circl Small Business Network, and this is the Circl's celebration of National Small Business Week. We're on day 4, and in just a little while, we are going to be hearing from our next speaker, Sarah Mutnick, who will be discussing Yelp 101, everything you've wanted to know about using Yelp and using it to help you grow your business. So continue to listen, and we'll be back in just a few minutes with Sarah. And again, thank you, Jason, and welcome to the Inner Circle.
Thank you. I love being here.
We want to thank all of our amazing speakers and our sponsors, NBC Universal, PSC&G, Yelp, ZD Glover Insurance and Financial Services, Women Tech Makers of New Jersey, and Websignia. And also our media and marketing partners, Capital Impact Group, the Statewide Hispanic Chamber of New Jersey, the SBA, New York and New Jersey Council, the SBDC at Rutgers Newark, Social Vibes Media, and Greater Newark Enterprise Corporation. Special thanks to the Websignia team and all who have worked tirelessly to make this event possible. Once again, I'm Vicki Lorena from Social Vibes Media. See you inside the Circle soon.